Something grabbed me in that haunted house, and I am still not sure it was human. I was a junior in college when my roommate Tyler talked me into going to this pop-up haunted attraction about 40 minutes outside of Columbus, Ohio. It was one of those places that sets up every October in an old industrial building near the edge of town. No real website, just flyers stapled to telephone poles and a Facebook page with maybe 200 followers. The kind of place that exists for 3 weeks and then vanishes like it was never there. There were 4 of us. Me, Tyler, his girlfriend Amber, and our friend Derek. We went on a Wednesday night because tickets were cheaper. The parking lot was just a gravel lot next to the building with a hand-painted sign that said, "Enter if you dare." Real original stuff. We were laughing the whole walk up. The line was short, maybe 10 people ahead of us. It was cold that night. That sharp October cold that gets into your jacket no matter how thick it is. We stood there making jokes, trying to act like we were not actually a little nervous. What nobody told us at the door was that they were sending people through one at a time. We found that out when we got to the front and the guy working the entrance, this teenager in face paint, told us to split up. Tyler went first, then Amber, then Derek, then me. I stepped inside alone. The building smelled like fog machine fluid and something else underneath it. Something old, like a basement that has not been opened in years. The first few rooms were standard stuff. Strobe lights, props, actors in masks jumping out from behind curtains. One of them got me pretty good and I laughed at myself for flinching. I was maybe halfway through when I noticed something felt different. The spacing between rooms got longer. The hallways got darker. The sound design changed from dramatic music to just this low, barely audible hum. It made the air feel heavier somehow. I told myself it was intentional atmosphere. Good design. They were building tension. Then I walked into a hallway where there was nothing. No props, no lights except a faint green glow somewhere far ahead. No actors. Just this long stretch of darkness that I had to walk through. I was about halfway down it when I felt breathing on the back of my neck. I spun around and there was nothing there, at least nothing I could see. The darkness behind me was total. I stood still for a second, heart pounding, telling myself it was a fog machine vent or something. I kept walking, then I heard a footstep behind me. One footstep, deliberate, close. I picked up my pace. Another footstep matched mine. I walked faster. It walked faster. I stopped completely, and there was a pause. And then one more footstep that did not belong to me. I said out loud, "Nice try." Nobody laughed. Nobody jumped out. Nothing happened. I turned on my phone flashlight even though they told us not to. I swept it behind me down the hallway. Empty, completely empty as far back as I could see. The hallway was narrow, maybe 4 feet wide. There was nowhere to hide, no doors, no curtains, nothing. I turned back around and kept walking with my light on. At the end of the hallway there was a door. I pushed through it and found myself in a room that was clearly not part of the attraction. Bare concrete floor, wire shelving along the walls with cleaning supplies and cardboard boxes. A single work light hanging from the ceiling. And in the corner of the room facing the wall was a figure. It was not moving. It was not wearing a costume. It was just a person in dark clothing standing completely still, facing the corner like a child being punished. I said, "Hey, is this part of the thing?" It did not move. I said, "I think I went the wrong way. Can you point me back to the exit?" The figure turned around slowly, and what I saw made every single muscle in my body lock up. It was not a face I can describe in any way that makes sense. It was not disfigured or monstrous. It was just wrong. The proportions were wrong. The eyes were too far apart. The mouth was too wide. And it was smiling at me in a way that communicated something I cannot put into words. Not aggression, not hunger, just pure patient wrongness. I backed through the door I came in from, and I ran. I ran back down that dark hallway and through the strobe rooms and past an actor who yelled at me, and I did not stop until I burst out the exit door into the cold parking lot air. Tyler and Amber and Derek were already outside waiting. They said I looked like I had seen a ghost. I told them what happened, and Derek thought I was messing with them. We went to the ticket booth and I told the woman working it that there was someone in a back room who did not seem like staff. She got this look on her face. Not surprise. More like recognition. She called someone on a radio and spoke quietly, and then told me everything was fine and offered me a partial refund without me even asking for one. I took it. We left. I did not look back at the building, but here is the thing I still think about. When I was running back down that hallway, the one where I heard the footsteps, my phone flashlight was on. I was moving fast, and at the very edge of the light, just for a second, I saw a shadow moving along the wall beside me, keeping perfect pace. Not behind me, beside me. I was the only one in that hallway. I have never been able to explain that. That was just the beginning. The next incident will make you question the shadows in your own room. I need to preface this by saying I have never touched anything stronger than alcohol since this happened, and I am not sure the substances or even what caused it. My name is Caleb. I grew up in a bad household. My older brother Marcus and I were raised by a father who was unpredictable in the worst way. He was a large man, 6'4", and he had this particular way of standing in doorways and watching you that still makes my skin crawl to remember. He left when I was 13 and I have not seen him since. I have been in therapy on and off for most of my adult life because of what those years did to me. I am telling you this because it matters later. Last fall, my friend group decided to do a haunted attraction outside of Nashville for Halloween. 6 of us. We pre-gamed at my friend Jordan's apartment before we went. I had 2 beers. That was it for me. I have never been a big drinker, and I have smoked weed maybe twice in my life because it consistently makes me spiral. I knew better than to touch it that night. The others were a different story. By the time we called the rideshare, most of them were loose and laughing and in that easy social mode that I have always envied because my brain does not really work that way. The attraction was in a converted warehouse on the south side of the city. The line was long and loud. Music was pumping from speakers mounted above the entrance. It had that carnival energy that feels fun on the surface but slightly off underneath, if you are paying attention. I started feeling uneasy in line, and I could not explain why. We got inside, and I will give them credit. The production quality was high. Multiple rooms, professional actors, good lighting design. But I was already in a state I can only describe as hyper-aware. Every loud noise hit me like a slap. Every sudden movement made my body react before my brain could tell it to calm down. About a third of the way through, we entered a room with a red glow. Low-hanging fog. A single actor in a formal suit and a grotesque mask moving through a scripted performance in the center of the room, getting in people's faces, doing the bit. I stood near the back of my group with my eyes moving around the room the way they always do in crowded spaces, and that is when I saw someone standing in the far corner. Not performing, not moving. Just standing there perfectly still, watching our group. He was tall, very tall. The specific build of someone I spent my childhood being terrified of. Dark clothing, standing with his weight on one leg, arms loose at his sides, head slightly tilted. The way my father used to stand in doorways. I told myself it was an actor, a stationary scare tactic. I told myself the resemblance was just my brain pattern matching in a high-stimulus environment. I know how trauma works. I know how the mind fills in shapes from shadows. But then the figure's head turned, and it looked directly at me, not at the group. At me specifically. And I cannot tell you why I know that, except that I know it the same way you know when someone across a crowded room is looking at you, and not anyone else. The sound that came out of me was involuntary. My friend Priya grabbed my arm asking what was wrong, and I pointed to the corner and said, "There is someone standing there." Everyone looked. The corner was empty, not just the figure gone. The corner was empty in a way that felt impossible given how small the room was and how many people were in it. There was nowhere to go. The wall was solid. The fog was low, but not low enough to hide someone. He was there, and then he simply was not. I got out. Jordan walked me through a side exit, and we sat on a curb outside while the others finished. He sat with me and did not push me to talk. When I told him later who I thought I saw, he got quiet and then said, "I know you, Caleb, and you do not make things up." That helped. A little. I went home alone that night. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building in East Nashville. I double-locked the door and left the lights on. I was exhausted in that bone-deep way that comes after your nervous system has been running hot for hours. I fell asleep on my couch with the TV on. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I woke up. I do not know what woke me. The TV was still going. The lights were still on. Everything looked exactly as I had left it, but the air in the room felt different. That is the only way I know how to describe it. Thicker. Like when you walk into a room where someone has been standing for a while. I sat up slowly and looked toward the hallway. The hallway light was off. I had left it on. Standing at the end of the hallway in the darkness just beyond where the living room light reached was a figure. The same height, the same build, the same slight head tilt. I could not see a face, just the shape of him, standing there in my hallway at 2 in the morning. In my locked apartment on the 3rd floor, I screamed. My neighbor knocked on the wall. I turned on every light in the apartment and checked every room and every closet and under the bed and behind every door. I was alone. The front door was still double-locked from the inside. The windows were closed and latched. There was no one there. But here is what I found in the hallway. On the floor, directly where the figure had been standing, there was a single large footprint in the dust near the baseboard. I am not a large person. I wear a size 9 shoe. This print was easily a size 12 or 13. I photographed it. I still have the photo. I have shown it to people who know me and know I do not do this for attention. I have never found an explanation. My therapist and I have talked about it at length. Stress response, hypervigilance, hypnopompic hallucination, all plausible, all possible. But none of those explanations account for the footprint. If your heart is already racing, take a deep breath, because our final story is the one that no one survived to tell. Not completely, anyway. I took a job at a haunted attraction once. I thought it would be easy money. I lasted 4 hours. My name is Renee. I was 22, living in a rental house with 2 other girls in a suburb outside of Indianapolis. My co-worker Destiny had been working at this haunted farm attraction for 2 seasons, and she made it sound like the easiest cash she had ever made. Walk around in costume, scare some people, get paid. The place ran through all of October, Thursday through Sunday nights. I needed the money, so I said yes. The farm was about 25 minutes outside of the city on a 2-lane road with nothing on either side but fields and tree lines. The attraction had multiple sections. 2 haunted barn walkthroughs and a cornfield maze that wrapped around the back of the property. Destiny introduced me to the site coordinator, a guy named Paul who wore a flannel and a headset and talked fast. Paul gave me my assignment. I would be stationed in the corn maze. My character was a wandering figure. No speaking, no engaging directly with guests. Just moving through the rows, appearing suddenly, making eye contact, disappearing. He said the silence makes it worse than any jump scare. I believed him. They gave me a white dress, long and pale face makeup with dark circles under my eyes. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked genuinely unsettling. Destiny walked me out to the maze before guests arrived. She showed me the designated paths I was allowed to use and the sections of the field that were off limits. She pointed out the small orange flags on stakes that marked the approved actor pathways. She told me to stay on the flags and I would be fine. Supervisor check-ins every 45 minutes. Radio clipped to a strap under my costume if I needed anything. She left and I was alone in the corn. The first hour was actually fun. Guests came through in groups and I would drift out of the rows ahead of them and just stand there, still as a post. staring until they noticed me and screamed or laughed or grabbed each other. I was getting into it. Then around the second hour, something changed. I was moving between positions using one of the flagged pathways when I heard something in the rows to my left. Not guests. Guests were noisy and the maze routed them through specific channels. This was quiet. A single deliberate rustling. The sound of someone moving slowly and carefully through corn stalks, trying not to be heard. I stopped walking. The sound stopped. I kept going. It started again. I told myself it was another actor moving through the field. We had maybe 8 people out there that night. Totally possible. But the feeling that came with the sound was wrong. When Destiny moved nearby earlier, I had felt nothing. This felt like being watched. I hit my radio and asked Paul if any actors were working the northwest section of the maze near the 3rd flag marker. There was a pause. Then he said no, that section was just me right now. I asked if maybe a guest had wandered off the path. He said he would send someone to check. I waited near the flag marker, not moving. The corn around me was still, no wind. That flat silence that open fields get late at night where you can hear your own heartbeat. Then I smelled something. Cigarette smoke. Right next to me. Not drifting from a distance, close. Like someone standing arm's length away was exhaling in my direction. I stepped back fast and swung my flashlight around. The rows nearest me were empty, but the stalks on my left were still moving slightly, like something had just passed through them. I did not wait for the check-in. I walked fast toward the nearest exit point at the edge of the maze and found a supervisor named Greg coming in to look for me. I told him what happened, and he went quiet in that way people do, when something you have said matches something they already know. He said they had some issues with trespassers earlier in the season. He said it casually, like it was nothing, but his eyes said something different. He walked me back to the staging area, and Paul told me I could take a break or call it a night and they would pay me either way. I decided to call it a night. I was not going back into that field. I changed out of my costume, got my payment in cash, said goodbye to Destiny, and walked to my car alone at the edge of the gravel lot. It was late. Most of the staff vehicles were clustered near the barn. Mine was at the far end of the lot because I had arrived after most people. I drove home the way I came. Long 2-lane road, dark fields, occasional farmhouse lights in the distance. I was 15 minutes out when my headlights reflected off something in my rearview mirror. A car. No lights on, just running dark behind me. I noticed because there were no other cars out here. Nothing had followed me out of the lot that I had seen. But there it was, maybe 10 car lengths back, keeping pace. I sped up slightly. It sped up, I slowed down. It slowed down. I turned onto a county road I did not need to take. It turned with me. My hands went cold on the wheel. I was telling myself I was being paranoid. It was just someone else who lived out this way. There was a reasonable explanation. But then I turned onto a road that I knew for a fact led nowhere useful for anyone who did not live on my specific street. And the car without lights followed me onto it. I called 911. The dispatcher asked my location and I gave it, reading off the road signs as I passed them, voice shaking. She stayed on the line with me and told me to drive toward the police substation on Meridian Road, which was about 6 minutes away. I drove there. I did not stop for any light that I could safely roll through. The car without light stayed behind me the entire time, through every turn. When I pulled into the substation parking lot, the dark car slowed, past the entrance, and kept going down Meridian Road without stopping. A deputy came outside when I called into the intercom. I told him everything. He took a report and had a cruiser go out and look for a vehicle matching what I had described. They found nothing. He let me sit in the lobby for half an hour before I felt okay enough to drive home. Another deputy followed me back to my house and waited until I was inside with the door locked. That was the end of my career as a haunted attraction actress, but it was not the last thing that happened. 2 nights later, I woke up at 3 in the morning to the Smell of cigarette smoke in my bedroom. My window was closed. My roommates did not smoke. There was no fire alarm going off, no source I could find anywhere. Just that smell, the same one from the cornfield. Right there in my room while I was sleeping. I turned on my lamp and looked around. Nothing. Empty room. Locked window. Door still closed, but my bedroom door, which I always keep cracked open at night, was shut. Fully closed. I had not closed it. I sat in my bed with the light on until morning. I moved to a different apartment the following month. I told my roommates it was about rent. It was not about rent. I have never smelled cigarette smoke in that new place. Not once. I do not know who was in that cornfield. I do not know who followed me home. And I really do not know what closed my bedroom door. But some nights I still wake up at 3 in the morning, and the first thing I do before I even open my eyes is smell the air. 3 stories. 3 people who walked into the darkness and came out changed. The haunted house is supposed to be the scary part. The controlled fear. The safe version of something dangerous. You pay your ticket, you walk the path, you scream on cue, and then you step back out into the parking lot and laugh it off. But sometimes the thing that follows you out is not the kind you can laugh off. If any of what you heard tonight felt familiar, if you have experienced something you cannot explain, you are not alone. And if you are watching this late at night with the lights off, maybe consider keeping them on a little longer. There are more stories like these. They come in every week. And if you want to hear them, subscribe right now so you never miss what comes next. Sleep safe.